This is International Professional Communication with a focus on language and global communicative competence. This week we consider the impact of bilingualism, multilingualism. We identify and build global communicative competence and begin exploring some resources for the first assignment in this course, the comparative analysis paper. To begin, I'm just going to skim a bit through the text through Chapter 2, The Role of Language in Intercultural Business Communication in the Varner and Beamer text, after which I'll just give an overview of this week. I will highlight the impact of bilingualism, multilingualism, and we'll explore BELF, Business English Lingua Franca. Okay, this first chapter here, keep in mind the real cognitive advantages of being bilingual, the importance of the relationship between language and culture. On page 45, it talks about the lubricant that gets a conversation moving forward. I always think about in Minnesota, so many people, we talk about the weather. Well, it's a lubricant for moving the conversation forward. As you consider a target country that you will examine metaphorically as part of this first assignment in this course, think about the language of that country. What is that lubricant that moves the conversation forward with the language in the culture and country that you are examining? Language is clearly a reflection of our environment. I had thought about starting this module recording with the Kyowa Samui desu ne. Again, about the weather. That's Japanese. This is, isn't it cold today? Because it happens to be pretty cool on the day that I am recording this. This chapter also talks about changes in language, implications of a language barrier. All too often, there's the problem of people who speak English assuming that somehow it is a superior language. Of course it is not. I think of that over half of the world is bilingual. They highlight India on page 53, talking about how it's a prime example of linguistic diversity with about 600 languages. So there's so much to consider in terms of the role of language in intercultural business communication. What is the particular company language? How does that impact the staffing choices, different types of assignments within a company? And on page 60, Varner and Beamer, this is where they highlight BELF, Business English as a Lingua Franca. I have 3 articles on this by Luhiala, Saminin, Kankarata, and colleagues, and how they have really gone into much more depth on this concept of business English as a lingua franca, and specifically the notion and development of global communicative competence. Be sure to focus on the small in focus pieces throughout this chapter. In one case, on page 65, they talk about the amount that the European Union spends annually on translation, and I'm going to highlight another report from the EU on the importance of language and global communicative competence. The information they provide on choosing an interpreter and working with an interpreter may well be new to you. It's very important. The last part of this chapter highlights effective written communication, pages 73 and on. In this particular case, we are going to focus more on the design of messages in the next module, but for purposes here, just continue to focus most on the first 2/3 of this particular chapter. Let's continue. This is the overview for week 2. If someone asked you, what is global communicative competence? How would you respond? And more specifically, what are your plans for developing it, for developing global communicative competence this term and throughout your academic and professional work lives? You have this resource here. You also have the slide set from Barnard Beamer. Choose one of the following. You'll see there to read and discuss online in our course forum. The work due, again, is a clear, detailed response and as part of the course forum for week 2. This week we will have discussion leaders who will pose some questions to get the conversation going as well. And then please read and begin to explore resources associated with the first assignment. This impact of bilingualism and multilingualism from the ethnologue.com site. Our continents, the number of languages, the percent of people in the world that speak those languages. Another table from this work and this site, the distribution of languages by number of first language speakers. That 40% of the world's population have one of the most common 8 languages as a first language. These languages are Mandarin, Hindi, Spanish, English, Bengali, Portuguese, Arabic, and Russian. In contrast, by far most languages, well over 4,000, are spoken by less than 2% of the world's population, and some by only a handful of people. Some additional shots from this site. I encourage you to visit this site, especially explore the country and its languages, that you are considering for use in this first assignment, your target country and its culture. Again, you'll find any number of excellent tables there to examine living languages and the number of current speakers. The distribution, again, just showing you where this earlier table is from. In this case, just at the very beginning of browsing by language name, I was just struck by, this doesn't even include all of the A's. It's just just incredible. I was thinking and reflecting back on my journey last summer to Tanzania. And we're about in this area right here, and how obviously many different languages there that I was exploring on this site, but then also looking at the language families. In my particular case, I just worked to speak as much Swahili as I could for the few weeks there. There are clear advantages of bilingualism. It's linked to a number of cognitive benefits. It has an influence on all of our brain processes. There's just any number of fascinating resources on this. And the percentage, again, of bilingual speakers in the world, much higher than those who only speak one language. And the percent just in the U.S. population of those who spoke a language other than English at home, and its increase. And clearly, this is already a decade old. So you just know that it's on the increase as well. And as I mentioned, the cognitive benefits. A bilingual brain can have better attention and task switching capacities than the monolingual brain. I have read in other studies how if you are in a business environment and you're putting a team together, the importance of having as many uh, bilingual, multilingual speakers on it as possible, because a person who speaks more than one language processes a problem or an issue, or just, you're brainstorming different directions or options that you might have. That person will have a richer experience through thinking and through sharing, and will have more options to bring to the table. From Science News. Now, this study, Bilinguals See the World in a Different Way, even as it relates to color perception. Yes, this study was from 2011, but some interesting related stories just from 2016 here. Especially bilingual brains activate different networks when reading, and also that language juggling requires a bilingual brain in a good way. Again, very important resources to begin to examine. Now, the second focus here, global communicative competence, and this notion. These researchers, largely from Finland, okay, have come up with the business, English, or English as a business lingua franca, and a model for this whole notion of global interaction and a shared core of our English language that focuses on, notice this last sentence, interactional skills, rapport building, and the ability to ask for and provide clarifications. In a nutshell, this is their model of global communicative competence in a business context. Note, yes, business know-how, competence in business English as a lingua franca. Not that the English has to be perfect grammatically, but it's understanding a common vocabulary for use in the business environment. Continued work to develop multicultural competence, and we will especially talk about this more next week. But that through all of this, at the core, then, is your development of global communicative competence. So what language does global business speak? In this case, this paper focuses on their development of this BELF concept. Note that it originates from two large research projects that they did across 9-10 years. And they were inspired by research on English as a lingua franca, or the primary language being spoken. And their findings showed how the domain of business, and particularly its goal-oriented nature, was significant for BELF discourse and the perceptions of communication of the practitioners themselves. Overall, it can be argued that for BELF speakers, note again, grammatical correctness is not nearly as important as the genre knowledge of their own specific field of expertise. So think of the business that you're in and the importance of understanding that field of expertise and having a shared understanding of what, when, how, why to communicate. Here's the gist on the competence in BELF. Again, knowledge of English, core language, but more important, the business-specific multimodal genres. Note, strategic competence means connecting on a relational level. Again, asking for, providing clarification, making questions, signaling non-comprehension, and paraphrasing. Now, it's kind of interesting that signaling non-comprehension. In any number of cases, in my own international communication contexts. Oftentimes a speaker from especially more high context cultures would say yes, 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 and I would assume comprehension when it did not necessarily mean that. It just meant, yes, I heard that. It does not necessarily signal comprehension. BELF means a shift in focus, again from grammatical accuracy instead to interactional development of rapport and trust. A tolerance of different accents, discourse patterns, ways of doing things. It's being flexible, understanding the significance of multilingual competence for intercultural competence. Therefore, we have this very front and center at week 2 of this course. Another article by these same set of researchers, Language as an Issue in International Internal Communication. If English, what English? There's any number of global virtual teams working across our world as we speak. You have greater than a 50% chance or likelihood in your work that you will be part of a global virtual team. Most of the students in this course have English as a first language, perhaps not everyone. So as you think of the different teams that are working in our world, and in many or most cases, everyone on the team, each person does not have English as a first language, but are simply using English as the business language. Another great article. I mentioned the European Union and their work, very strategic work on mapping best multilingual business practices. They talk about in detail their sampling here. You have the link to get to this study. And they, through their work here, they identified the importance of that multilingualism and the work across different countries and the large return or not that companies would have if they paid attention to multilingualism. They noticed that 56% of Europeans speak at least one foreign language. 80% understand at least another. 38% at this time spoke fluent English. And they noticed that the importance of the different services and the increase that they wanted in global work, and therefore what strategies, what should they do? They grouped these into 3 categories. 1, staff and strategic issues. Encourage companies to develop a strategy. Promote that strategy. Make sure that people have a CV format that specifies the level of language skills. On another level, language management and learning, they encourage language learning through multimedia. They define a consistent level of proficiency and training plans. And on the 3rd level, just information and communication, and multilingual communication, the encouragement to use these different systems, to set up tools, to support multilingual social networks. So I ask each of you, how are you working to develop your own global communicative competence? Use this week to sketch out an initial plan for yourself. Specific work due, again, the course forum is sort of really the workhorse of this course. Definitely dig into the resources, post reflections on the resources, as well as post responses to the discussion leaders and contribute to the online discussion. The second part, definitely get started on the first assignment. Identify and share the target country that you plan to investigate. And we'll be digging in next week much more in terms of how do we look at this target country metaphorically. Thanks, as always. Send questions, post insights. I'll look forward to your work.